You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
وتكلم من هناك لشوارزنيجر.
Va a pegarle el Ronaldinho Gaucho. Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! 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 ¡Golazo!
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
And welcome to Soccer Today. Kevin Laramee, joined by Duane Rollins. Duane, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, Kevin. I'm doing well. How are you?
I am doing pretty good, Duane. Now, you wanted to start the show with a little announcement today.
Yeah, sure. And if you follow me on Twitter, you would have seen something similar to this. But after several years of working for myself and primarily focusing, well, not primarily, almost entirely focusing on Major League Soccer and other things like that, I have decided to take a position, a full-time job as a social media manager for a consulting firm here in the city of Toronto. Well, now what that will mean for this show is it might change the schedule and the timing of it, but not the actual production of it. We will continue to produce Soccer Today. It will continue to be my primary media focus in terms of covering Major League Soccer and Toronto FC and the impact and all those teams that we talk about all the time. So it's not going to change, but I do want to let you know that over the next week or so, we're going to have to work out a few things, Kevin and I, in terms of how this is going to look moving forward. And, I hope you understand that because we've given you a lot of free shows for all the years. And certainly it's just not something that we can, I need to find other things to challenge myself right now a little bit as well. So that I think ultimately, though, Kevin, is going to, and I've been thinking about this a lot, I think that this change might actually result in, ironically, having me produce more content because bluntly, I've been a little burnt out other than the podcast for a while now, and having a new refreshing challenge, I think, might allow me to get back and write a little bit more in a hobby sense than it was in the past. But certainly, I think you might get my voice out there in written form a little bit more.
And we're working on ways to actually have that as well. Different iteration to continue the growth of the Sports Podcast Network. Almost back to normal with the new year. We got a new What's the Score coming out today from last weekend, and other shows coming up in the next few days as well.
Yeah, and I've informed Kevin that we are committed to bi-weekly 5 Rings starting, I think, next week. That one after the Olympics. Mike, you talk about burnout, Kevin.
Yeah, right. For the daily show of the Olympics was amazing, but the 4-year wait between the 2 years really took its toll the day after the Olympics.
Yeah, it was hard to get into that flow again, and changes in both Kevin and I's life too got in the way. But that is
the birth of Soccer Today as well has. If you go back to earlier, a few years ago, we had 2 Solitudes and then USL Radio, one or two soccer shows, so it was easier to do a 5 Rings than now with Soccer Today. It's not that it's difficult to do 5 Rings, but it's the timetable is different.
Yeah, but I think the biweekly schedule that we had in the lead up to the Olympics will come back. It's something that it's a show that it's my baby show. I'd always wanted to do something Olympic related. We did it through the 2 cycles, and I am pretty committed to getting that show through to Pyeongchang at this point too, because I think it's a worthwhile thing.
We're committed to get ourselves to Pyeongchang, so that's the other question.
Exactly. All right, enough of that silliness. Kevin, the news today, it is still a little slow in Major League Soccer circles, but of course yesterday there was a bit of a bombshell that came down. Julie Stewart-Brinks made some reporting. Also, RSL has been making some noise about this as well, in terms of Landon, Landon Donovan.
So where will Landon land? That's the question.
Yes. Landon. That sounds like a 30 for 30.
Because the Galaxy told Landon Donovan a few weeks ago, I believe, that he was not going to come back with the Galaxy. So if you want to retire, it's all up to you. And then out of nowhere, a few days ago, started surfacing, oh, RSL wants him. San Jose, Seattle. And maybe now an Eastern Conference team, according to Julie Stewart-Binks earlier today. So what's it going to be? Where will Landon land? And will Landon play in 2017? Is it the idea? If you go back to his return a few months ago, it was all about helping the Galaxy through a rough patch. They made it through. They went into the playoff, didn't perform as expected in the playoff, but it's hard when you have the expectations of the Galaxy of literally being there every single year. It was Seattle's year, Colorado in the conference final. But where will Landon land? Is he motivated? Did for a few months that he played for the Galaxy, did it rekindle the fire? That's the question.
Yeah, well, we always said, I mean, I think if you go back into the archives, and I can't even remember what show it would have been called at the time because I've had too many at this point, but if you go back into the archives and to look at the show that when Landon did initially retire, I'm pretty sure that I would have said he'll be back in a couple years. And you know, not to brag about that because I wasn't the only one that said it. It just seemed like it was a premature kind of burnout sort of, I need a break, kind of like me taking a job so that I can refresh myself to do this moving forward again, right? Like that's kind of how it seemed at the time. And certainly I think that we're seeing that right now. And there's a lot of angles on this. There's the Galaxy angle. I think that is significant too, why they are telling him that they want to part ways. And I think that probably speaks to a slight change in their direction.
Well, it's Gio's team, right? It's not going to be Landon and Robbie's team anymore. And that's why, in a way, his help was needed in 2016 when he came back, but it's not needed for 2017 and beyond, where they really want to build around Gio for the time that they still have him.
Yeah, precisely. And look, and they want to get a little younger, I think, too. And if you, as long as you're sort of holding on to Donovan, that you're holding on to your past a little bit, and you got to, you know, you can't hold on to your past. You got to move forward in all aspects of life, including obviously Major League Soccer. So I think that makes sense. So then you move into this other stuff here, and you move into the Landon side of things, and what possibly could be motivating him right now to come back. And I think that there's a glowing thing that's right out there. There's a change in coaching in the U.S. men's national team, and I know there's a lot of U.S. men's national team fans out there that are screaming at their devices right now going no, because they don't want to go down this road. But if you want to just put yourself inside Donovan's head, I can't help but think that he might be a little bit motivated if he's going to come back, especially as a DP level player. And that's what the rumor is. Then he can't just be thinking about Major League Soccer. He's probably thinking about, and it's a 2-year contract too. He's probably
RSL, yeah. RSL has been it's been out there that a contract rumored to have been offered is 2 years at a DP level.
Yeah, and I don't think that that's a coincidence that will end in 2018, which is the World Cup year. I don't think that. And then you have to ask yourself a question whether he's good enough to get back into that look again. And certainly Bruce Arena is a guy that's comfortable with him.
Wow, I didn't think about that. It just made sense. Maybe because you remember last year he was asked a question when he was playing. Well, last year. It's still this year, technically, for a few hours. Still,
yeah.
When he was asked about the U.S. men's national team upon his comeback, he was saying, no, I'm just here to help the Galaxy. I have no thought, no desire. Maybe that changed.
Yeah, he's going to say the right things at that time, too. And Klinsmann was in charge at that point. And I think that the bridges had been blown up well and good. There's no way he was ever going to come back into that system as long as Jurgen Klinsmann was in charge. But now that he's not, I think that has to be back on the table. And I think it's naive to suggest that it's not.
Let's look at it with hindsight now. The year he retired is the year that he wasn't selected for the World Cup. Are those two events related?
And certainly, I think if you're looking at a burnout situation in terms of him, and that would play a major role into it, that he just didn't feel that it was right anymore for him, that it didn't feel right for him anymore, and he needed to get away. I'm not saying that this is absolutely what 100% is motivating him, but I can't help but think it's on there. And I know that there are a lot of people that are either unwilling to think about this or just want to shut it aside because they don't. Yeah, I think that's what it comes down to. There's a lot of Landon fans out there that don't want to see him come back and not be the way he was before. There's a lot of U.S. men's national team fans, particularly ones that are more European focused, that don't want to necessarily don't want to that think that maybe it's past him, that he shouldn't be there anymore. So there's a lot of factors at that, but just getting inside his own head, which of course no person can do, but trying to for a second, I would have to think that it is. But then there's another angle. Now we have 5 more minutes in this, so let's move to the Major League Soccer side of things. And RSL seems to be the most persistent rumor out there about this. It is relatively close to his West Coast roots. He is kind of a West Coast guy. He's always played in California with the exception of his Germany stint. So there is some sense about that. Now, RSL isn't exactly the sexiest place, but does Donovan require this at this part of his career? Is it RSL a team that Landon Donovan will look at and say that this is a team that will provide me with the opportunity to fulfill some personal goals? Like, obviously, I mentioned the international stuff may be there, but there's club goals too. He probably wants to come back and win another MLS Cup. Does he think that the Christless RSL is the same team as the Christ-full RSL was? Are they legitimately a close contender for a Major League Soccer championship? I'm not sure they are, Kevin.
No,
I'm
not sure at all. It's actually, I would have a lot of worry in a way if RSL would sign a Landon Donovan. We don't even know if he wants to come back. That's a caveat too. But if they do sign Landon Donovan, example RSL, we've been talking about for a year and a half how this league is getting younger. This league is getting top heavy, where your DPs need to be around the 30 age marker, not because of the old players can't do it. No, but it's a consistency. It's the overall all season, how you transition, how you build around. It's the consistency aspect. So when you do have that, you do have success. We've seen this many last few years with the runs of the Toronto, Montreal, Dallas, Seattle, Colorado, all teams that have been built over the last 18 months, and a certain consistency. Yes, they changed the coach in Seattle, but outside of that, there was a core. You remove 1 or 2 pieces here, of course, Martins in Seattle, but the consistency was what's needed. RSL does not necessarily do this right now. They're more of the 2.0 era MLS roster building type of phase right now, and Donovan will just be a band-aid for that situation for another 2 years, I believe.
Yeah, I think it's more of a relevancy play is what I would call that. Not that RSL has necessarily struggled in their market, but it does seem like that may be more marketing focused than it would be otherwise. There is the other rumor, the Julie Stewart-Brinks suggesting that there's a couple Eastern Conference teams that might be in the mix too, which of course leads to a lot of speculation here in the East amongst the fans of those clubs, and there are fans that want them and the fans that don't, and so on and so forth. But let's take a little quick look at that and figure out who might be offering him.
A team that's looking for maybe a new identity going into the future, a team that has some sun a lot in the question, and that's maybe one of the appeal that he will feel. Maybe Orlando.
Yeah, Orlando certainly is a team that has a lot of ambition and money to spend as well. They're also a team that, how do I put this delicately, that might take a flyer like this without much thought beyond of how it fits. Orlando reminds me a bit of TFC of old in the sense that they'll spend money, but they don't quite know how to spend it. And signing Landon Donovan to a DP contract, and if he's offered one in RSL, then perhaps it would have to be one in the East as well. Does seem to strike that way. But there are, Atlanta is another team. I think Atlanta has a lot of South American kind of instincts about them right now.
It would make sense in Atlanta, Duane. Sorry to interrupt you, but it would make sense in Atlanta, where you have a lot of new players coming into the league with a new coach, and you have a player with the experience that you would have, like Landon Donovan, coming in to a team and help the launch of that team. That would actually make a lot of sense.
Yeah. Other than, like I said, they're focused on South American talent right now, so that is something to consider as well. You get into those are the teams that, from a DP perspective, it might make some sense. But if you get into the TAM perspective, I don't think he's going to be less than a TAM player. But if you get into a TAM perspective, then I could see several teams that are near the top of the East this past year that could use a player of Donovan if he's close to what he was in the past. Look, he's got a lot of quickness. He's an explosive player that can kind of play He's a forward earlier in his career, but I think you could drop him back a little bit further, play him more into a wide midfield position right now if he still has the athleticism. And obviously he's older, so he may not. But if he does, I could see him fitting in New York system, the Red Bulls I'm talking. I don't think he fits in NYCFC because of the stadium that they play in. I could see him fitting in Toronto. I could see him fitting in Montreal, but it's whether or not those teams would be wanting to spend TAM money on a guy like that who I do think has a lot of questions about him. And that's something that maybe a team that thinks it's a contending team doesn't necessarily want to do. But the other side of that, of course, is a contending team may look at a player like Donovan, if they can get him at the right price, if he has a DP offer on the table, maybe you can't. But if you can, then maybe you might look at him and go, he might be the final piece. He might be the piece that puts us over the top. If Landon Donovan is in TFC's lineup in the MLS Cup final, is the MLS Cup in Toronto right now? I don't know. That's speculation. It's kind of silly, but
well, it's if my aunt had blank, should be my uncle, right?
Yeah, well, precisely. So it's hard to say, but nonetheless, lots of questions there. This obviously is a story that will continue moving forward, but for now, I think we'll stop it. Take a quick break. We'll come back and we'll do some bits and bites.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
The bits and bites on Soccer Today. Duane, by the way, St. Clair's next show, January 20th in Ottawa. Get your tickets.
All right, St. Clair, Ottawa,
January 20th.
Get out and check them out. We'll let you know the next time they're in Montreal or Toronto as well. So they're pretty good live. They have a nice little following, and obviously we promote them. And they are big soccer fans. They are fans of the Fury. At least John is. Ryan is.
Yes,
Ryan
exactly.
and John. I always mix Ryan
yes.
John. I'm sorry, guys.
Exactly, but and as you can tell, they're very, very good too.
Yeah, there you go. Kind of, Sky, kind of like there's a lot. Yeah, it's a fun little band. Anyway, lots of stuff to talk about in the bits and bites stuff. Bits and bites is a little bit of that, a little bit of that, a little bit of everything, but not a lot to make a full snack. So we break it all up. I wanted to start with a couple USM and USW pieces of the file, and then Kevin, maybe you want to throw some stuff in after that.
I got a few bits and bites after, yes.
Yeah, Thomas Rongen named the U.S. men's national team head scout. Now, my question about this, Thomas Rongen is
head
a character.
Scout?
What the hell does that mean?
Well, we talked about a few weeks ago, Duane, that Jurgen Klinsmann was doing many jobs. Maybe that's one of the jobs that they're actually going to delegate now, and the next manager is going to be just a manager.
Yeah, and I guess it's a guy that goes looks at the players and to see if they can expand the pool a little bit. And I suspect that Rongen will be primarily focused on the domestic front, because I think that's the one area that Klinsmann did quite a good job on, was finding, German Americans for the most part, but passport Americans, we'll call them, for lack of a better way to put it, that to come into the program. And when I say passport Americans, I'm describing the fact that they have a second passport, not that they're less American than they are. I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole. Thomas Rongen will probably be looking at major league player, looking at, like Feilhaber and guys like that haven't necessarily got a look under Klinsmann to see whether they might come in. And maybe he'll be looking at Landon Donovan as well. Although, can you imagine what's this Landon Donovan scouting assignment look like? Yep, still Landon. Or nope, not Landon anymore. I guess that probably would be the scouting assignment, wouldn't it?
Well, the scout will probably make his recommendation, and then the selector or manager will make the final decision, no?
Yeah, probably. Camp Cupcake's going to be interesting this year with the new players, with Arena bringing in some guys.
It might not be Camp Cupcake anymore. Maybe some players will want to prove something, especially with the way that it's going in the Hex right now.
Yeah. Is it? Can we call speaking as a quick aside here? Canada's camp in January. Can it be Camp Timbit? Does that make sense?
Camp
If they have,
Timbits. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
yeah. Although I don't know if we have enough depth in our talent pool up here to have a secondary
Well,
camp.
we have as much depth as Timbits. You go there, there's always only 2-3 flavors. Sometimes there's more if you're lucky, if you get a cool Timmy's, but outside of that, you get 1 or 2. So yeah, we're the Timbits.
Precisely. All right. Let's see here for a second. Kevin,
Las Vegas will apparently make a bid. January 31st is the deadline for the next batch of expansion details that were given by Commissioner Garber a few weeks ago. So Las Vegas Mayor Carolyn Goodman said a few days ago that in the Las Vegas Review Journal by Jamie Monks that the bid was shut down last year, but there's going to be a city council meeting next week, and they'll decide if they can develop a plan to draw an MLS team to Las Vegas. It could be possible. There's maybe opportunities, and with the NHL now coming to Vegas, Vegas seems to maybe be the new sexy sports destination. Maybe MLS wants to be part of it, so maybe we will have the Golden Knights in Major League Soccer.
Yeah, Vegas has long been a desired destination. It's kind of been the largest center out there. Well, it's not that big, but it's kind of been the largest center that has no professional presence outside of the minor pro level for a long time, as we all well know. The NHL won the battle to get first in there, which wasn't much of a battle to win because I think the NHL was of the big 3.5 sports in the U.S., the one that had the most to gain and the least to lose by going into Vegas was the NHL. And I personally think it's going to blow up in their face, but that's just me.
Just the fact that the arena can be used in so many, it's going to be one of the most used arena now in Las Vegas because of all the shows that they could be there, from entertainment to sports to UFC type to wrestling type. We have already seen crazy amount of shows in that arena. And that's going to be one of the plus that the Golden Knights have is outside of them, that arena will be busy most nights, and that's a plus. So if you have an outdoor venue for Major League Soccer, maybe if you can do the same, that poor pitch, but maybe if you find a way to have a stage on top of the pitch and have event and special, and I don't know, something that you can have that venue busy most days could be a good financial idea.
Well, and I think the other side of it too is that now that the NHL is in, and now that most of the major sports in the United States are no longer pretending to be against gambling, there is the big elephant in the room in the United States sporting scene that
slot
I think
machines
Vegas,
in the cup.
I'm thinking the NFL, whether they might want to build a multi-purpose stadium that could eventually host an NFL team, and you would include soccer in that, as we've seen in other parts of North America when they do these developments. They're often soccer, sometimes the Fury development. Really, when you're talking about Lansdowne Live, it was mostly about getting a CFL team back in there, and the Fury were just beneficiaries of that. So you might see something similar there. The Heat would concern me. Down there, when do you play the games? You'd have to play them late at night, like 10 o'clock kickoffs in the summer. Otherwise, you'd literally be putting players in danger, I think. So there are
maybe it'll be a dome, Duane. We don't know if it's an NFL team. That could be like a climatized dome.
I think you'd almost have to do something like that because it's a challenging climate for sure.
But there's ways with technology now that you can ways to make it maybe with mist, or I don't know. Maybe there's ways they're going to do it. It's a problem that you have to cross once you get there. It's not that warm in Vegas all the time. Like right now, it's not that warm, but there's no soccer MLS right now. That's a good point. Another news that I wanted to mention, Duane, last week in La Presse in Montreal, it was saying Montreal dreams of World Cup ambitions for 2026. Mayor Denis Coderre has launched a feasibility project to see if they could host a game for the World Cup potential that Canada would, maybe a joint bid would have in 2026. So that's an interesting aspect, that there's already a plan in the works. Yeah, it's maybe talking about something before that's even possible to do. Yes, maybe it's putting the end result before the goal to get there. But it's something.
Yeah, there's a lot at play with the 26 bid. And obviously when FIFA blew up, a lot of the factors that existed prior to that blew up with it, and that has put the 26 bid in flux in a lot of ways. And I think that the U.S. is reluctant to team up with the other confederations, or the other federations within the confederation. But I think that maintains it is probably still the best bet that any of these places have, because I'm not too sure, for a lot of different reasons, the U.S. would win a direct bid, and I know American fans could get confused by that. I think the politics of FIFA are still against them in many ways. So including Canada in a U.S. bid, especially including Canada in a U.S.-Mexico-Canada bid, would be, I think, something that would benefit all three of those nations. And I also believe, as we've talked about on Five Rings, to bring this back to our, a topic we had earlier in here, that multi-nation bids are the future if we're going to keep games like, events like the World Cup, games like the Olympics. If we're going to keep them or bring those costs in line, then I think we're going to need to really look into sharing hosting in the future. And I think a multi-country bid would be something that would benefit that. And we're going to see it in 2020, and obviously the Euros, with the anniversary Euros, where they're having it over many countries, right? So I do think that that's the future. So certainly doesn't hurt Montreal to look at something like that. I bet you behind the scenes, at least, you'll be having similar things taking place in Edmonton and in Vancouver and in Toronto for sure as well. Ottawa probably would be in that mix as well. Those are right now, I think, the cities that would be most set up. Winnipeg probably could too, but it's a little bit small in terms of the stuff around it, hotels and things like that for a World Cup. But certainly the feasibility would be looked at there.
Yeah.
Kevin, let's turn our attention to the women for a second here. And there was a bit of a strange decision, considering some of the rhetoric that had been coming out for many months in terms of the U.S. women's national team pay dispute with the USSF. They parted ways, we'll say, with their lead counsel in that dispute, and are coming in with a different approach. And there's a lot of people speculating that this means that if you read the press release, there's a line in it that says, "We are focused now on having productive conversations with the USSF," and that word "productive" is really sticking out to people, because the gentleman who was in charge was a pretty aggressive guy, a big advocate for them, but very aggressive in his approach. The U.S. women have been very aggressive in their approach, and maybe with them losing the first sort of stage of that legally, in terms of the CBA still being in effect, they came to realize that they needed to be more conciliatory in terms of their negotiation moving forward. And look, there's not enough time in the bits and bytes to really get into the details of this pay dispute, and this is going to be a story we'll be following continually for a while. But certainly it's very complicated, and I think that a diplomatic approach might be the right approach. A diplomatic approach is the right approach in all of America right now, and it's nice to see at least one area of it starting it.
Well, instead of fighting, they decide to have discussions to see how we can maybe resolve actually some issues instead of trying to fight the overall issues.
Yeah, and there's talk. I mean, one of the things quickly on that that they do want to resolve is the per diems and stuff like that, right? Right now, there is a disparity there that has to do with the fact that the men renegotiated theirs halfway through the CBA, and there was no provision within the women's CBA to allow them to do the same. So there is this disconnect in terms of where the money is right now. So one thing the U.S. Federation could do, which would be a great good faith thing to do it within this negotiation, is just equalize those sort of peripheral things, like let them fly the same airlines, let them get the same per diems. That kind of thing would be a really good move to make. And if you have sort of an aggressive approach coming at them, maybe that's less likely to happen. And maybe now we can equalize that a little bit, which would be a good faith gesture by the USSF that would then allow these conversations to take place, to really delve into the complicated nature of what equal pay for equal play really means. Because it's not like, this is not like we're talking about guys working at Walmart. This is a very complex and nuanced sort of thing here to find out what the right number in terms of compensation for the women is, and how you factor the NWSL into it, and how you factor the differences in the prize money and everything else. So there's a lot of things at play here, Kevin.
All right, just quickly before we finish the segment, Duane, maybe a new player for the Montreal Impact. Panathinaikos Conte, who plays for Udinese, Greek midfielder, apparently, according to Tutto Mercato Web, so take it for what it's worth. Apparently, he mentioned that he was coming to the Montreal Impact. Cristi Tiello, who is a journalist from Italy, reported that the 1987 born player midfielder is making a transition to Montreal. Only played 5 league appearances so far in Serie A, and maybe we have a new, not an Italian this time, but it's the Italian file. Still, the Italian networks of connections by the Impact maybe came up with a new player.
And Udinese is a club that churns players elsewhere a lot for financial reasons. So I would suspect there would be a transfer involved in that if that were the case. But nonetheless, certainly a player moving from Udinese to another club is not rare at all. So there's probably some legs to that. We'll see whether it plays out because a lot of rumors happen, a lot of reasons for those rumors. Kevin, anything else before we say goodbye to the segment?
Well, I don't know if we talked about it, but Will Johnson to Orlando is official, so there's that as well. He will not be back with Toronto FC, but he is with the Lions.
Yeah, and look, he wanted playing time. Guys like Jay Chapman are going to demand a little more playing time next year and should be getting it at this point in time. Benoit Giroux has re-signed for another year. Obviously, his performance, his leadership in the playoffs was valuable. I think Toronto just feels that they can spend that money a little bit better than they would have had to spend to keep Will Johnson around another year. But certainly, fan favorite for the 1 year he was here, and he'll be missed, but probably the right move for all involved.
You're listening to Soccer Today on SPN Radio. You can find the on-demand version of this very show on iTunes, Stitcher, Feedburner, Podbay Player, Podbean, anywhere you get your podcasts under the Sports Podcasting Network feed. Subscribe to our YouTube page to make sure you never miss a live show talking about soccer today, the MLS postgame show, open lines after dark, 5 rings daily during the Olympics. Make sure you subscribe and give us a follow on Twitter at SportsPodNet and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network.
Quickly to wrap up the show today, we are keeping the holiday editions a little bit shorter than normal, but let's have a quick look at the English Premier League actions, which will start in a few hours from this recording this weekend. Hull City, Everton, 3 o'clock on Friday. By the time you're listening to this, that might be underway already. Kevin, I mean, there's an obvious game that jumps out to people, but beyond that, anything that jumps out this weekend?
All United Borough. Will Zlatan continue on his rampage, 11 goal in his last 10 games? Will that continue? Involved in the last 6 goals of Man United, either by scoring or assisting. So Zlatan in great form right now. Will that continue against Borough? There's a very, very high possibility. Chelsea Stoke, the same. Chelsea running rampant in the league. Probably will run over Stoke. Maybe 1 or 2-0, the way Conte does, but still dominating the whole 90 minutes. Leicester, West Ham. Will Leicester bounce back from a tough few weeks? Mahrez, after a week of being dropped, will be back. Will he be back to his former form of last year? So far, not the case in 2016-17. So can Leicester win at home versus West Ham? But the game of the week, Duane, is the last one on Sunday.
Saturday, but yes.
Saturday, sorry.
New Year's Eve day. It's look, I'm a little terrified for my New Year's Eve because it's probably going to start at 12:30 p.m. and I really don't want that, but we'll see how this goes.
Water and a nap, Duane. That's what you'll need.
Yeah, water and a nap for sure. Liverpool, Man City. We talked about this on our Wednesday show, the show that we did around Bob Bradley. This is a game that is, just to repeat ourselves really quickly on that I do not think either one of those teams can afford to lose. Especially if you look at Chelsea Stoke, you would have to think Chelsea is a pretty strong favorite to win that game there. If either of those teams loses, then you are looking at a title race that is almost all but done on January 1st. And that's unfortunate for everyone involved, but it's especially unfortunate for the clubs there. Now, if City gets the win, jumps 2 points out on Liverpool, then I believe that with the talent that they have, with the manager that they have, that they will maintain a belief, at least in themselves, that they can get on a roll and start winning game after game after game to at least put pressure on Chelsea. Obviously, Liverpool with Klopp and sort of the confidence that they've developed since he came on as manager will feel the same way if they get that and will want to jump 4 points ahead of City to sort of maintain a grip, like a solid grip on second place in the table. So this is clearly the biggest game of the weekend. I do think that it will be a highly entertaining game as well because you have two teams that aren't defensively very good.
I was going
right
to
now.
say, Duane, like Liverpool's greatest game this season, it's the game against Arsenal 4-3. So, yeah, you get the picture.
Yeah, and City, although they got the clean sheet last game out, they haven't really been covering themselves in glory, and Stones limped off the field last game too to make things even more complicated. So this will be, I think, a game. That said, it's probably gonna be 0-0 now, but it generally is set up to be one of those games that even a neutral will want to sit down and watch. Obviously, I'm not a neutral, so like I said, I hope my New Year's Eve doesn't start 11 and a half hours too early, but nonetheless, we'll see how that goes. The other game that does catch my attention, Kevin, on the Saturday anyway, is the Swansea-Bournemouth game, simply because of the reasons that we talked about also on Wednesday.
Oh, Swansea, come on. And after we did the show on Wednesday, Bob Bradley did a great interview live on Football Today for like 10, 15 minutes the day after he got sacked. That was really awesome. But he was not defiant, but he was starting to be pissed off. That's what he said. Like, look, you have to give me a chance. 11 games, no transfer window. Come on. So he had that feeling of, look, you name me, you give me a chance, but you actually don't give me a chance.
Yeah, it's, as I said on Wednesday, I think that the Bradley firing reflects more poorly on those that were doing the firing than on the man fired himself in terms of their, what was the word I used? Knee-jerkedness. The fact that, even if it's the right decision, there's still the decisions that led up to that are all, you can just keep pointing back to mistake after mistake. It's possible for more than one thing to be right at the same time, right? It's possible that Bob Bradley wasn't good enough to be the manager, and it's also possible that Bob Bradley wasn't given enough chance once he was given the managership, right?
Well, you know what might happen?
Exclusive.
No, exactly. And you know what might happen? He has probably different ways to do a training session that the player used to, things that, when you enforce change, it does rub people the wrong way. And if enough people that it got rubbed the wrong way started talking to the ear of the upper management about it, then you create a mutiny situation, and eventually they just gave in and they changed the coach.
Yeah, and look, it's a bit of a mess. So that's why that's probably the 10 o'clock game I'll watch, simply to see how those players react. The idea of a coach bump, like a coach firing bump, I think it's generally been shown to be bunk, but certainly when it's the second firing of a coach in the same year, I think it's especially going to be shown as bunk. But
I think it'll be a bump, but on the other side. I think it'll be a bump, but on the lower end. They'll continue to lose. Go Bournemouth on Saturday.
Yeah, a boot in the ass.
Exactly. That's a bump.
Yeah, look, and Bournemouth is exactly the teams that they need to beat if they're going to have any chance to stay up. So it's an intriguing game. Quickly, the rest of the lineup. I mentioned Hull City, Everton today. Hull, we talked about them on Wednesday as well. They don't seem as bad as they are, but nonetheless, Everton coming off a big win is the win, so they're going to look to build on that momentum. Burnley, Sunderland on Saturday at 10. The 10 o'clock games are as follows: Sunderland, West Brom, Man United, Liverpool, or Middlesbrough. I can't talk right now. Chelsea, Stoke, we talked about, and Leicester, West Ham.
Yeah, and on Sunday, Watford, Tottenham. So Watford versus Spurs, and Arsenal, Crystal Palace, a London kind of derby at 11 a.m. on Sunday.
Exactly. I do lots of London derby. It's just not one that really has much historical relevance.
No, because Crystal Palace is usually never in the same league as
they're
Arsenal.
up and down. Yeah. Nonetheless. Anyway, Crystal Palace is a fun team to watch sometimes, and we'll see how they continue.
Big
whether
Sam,
they can continue
Big
to rebound.
Sam, undefeated still at Crystal Palace.
Yeah. Well, like I said, Crystal Palace can be a fun team to watch, but maybe not anymore.
Because Sam is there, and it'll be 11 guys behind the ball playing Route 1.
All right. You wanted to mention real quickly, I think the last thought is that you had thoughts on the German winter break and how much you liked that. So just share those before we say goodbye.
Well, I was watching a few documentaries about the Bundesliga, and it's interesting how you have a month pause in the middle of the season. but there's a training camp involved in that. And we talk a lot about formation, tactic, instincts, training. And during the regular season, you barely have 1-2 days to adjust, to move on. So it's a game to game basis. Say you adjust to the opponent, but there's nothing you can do to actually transform. After playing against every team at least once, in the middle of the season, you take a month break. So you can actually adjust, you can react. Your way you play, the instincts, correct things that you didn't like in the first half of the season, you have a few weeks to practice them, and then you go back and you test yourself again. I love that idea that you can, for the manager, for the coach, for the trainers, the tactical decisions, all those, you can adjust, you can make changes, and you get a month in the middle of the season to actually practice that, to get a little bit of break, but to actually mold your team, to practice things. There was a joke that they made. Offenheim is terrible at penalties this year. Well, there's something to practice in their winter camp. So I like that idea that you can actually react tactically and have time to practice it, to put it in effect, to implement it in that month of. There's a training camp involved. So in those 2 weeks of training camp in that month, that's very interesting to me.
Yeah, and certainly in terms of just the wear and tear on the body too is something that that I think that the English League needs to take a look at sooner rather than later. And I do believe very strongly in the importance of maintaining the Boxing Day games. I understand the cultural importance of those games to English people, Welsh people too, I assume, because it's in the same league. It matters. It's a family event. It's a
take the break after this week. Like take the break after January 1st. Boom, it's break time now.
And look, it doesn't have to be a month, but maybe 2 weeks where they're not playing internationally, they're not doing anything. You don't need to play this particular weekend of games. This is particularly the one weekend that I think would benefit anyone. Even if they just got rid of the New Year's Eve games, the New Year's Eve, New Year's Day games, I think that would go a long way to doing something to start to bridge the gap to giving them more of a break there. And you know, it's pretty easy to get those games back in the schedule. You could start it a week earlier. You could start the first week of August rather than the second week of August. That would be fine. That would give you a longer stretch before that international break that everyone hates so much. So right at the start of the season too. So I think there's solutions on here. This weekend for sure, I think, could go without anyone really being that upset. You maintain your Boxing Day, you take a break. Maybe you don't go a month because culturally speaking, I'm not sure the English people would stand for that, but a week or two would be quite beneficial for everyone involved, and it would recharge the batteries and I think make for better football overall.
Well, Kevin, that's what I'll take a look at. If you look at teams that are struggling or in a relegation battle, they have 2 weeks, well, they have a month, but they take 2 weeks intensively to work on things. And then they go have another shot at it. You know, I like that aspect of it. Not separating the table into two championship. No, it's the same damn table. It's a one table. Boom. But you do have a little break so team can react, adjust, and then have a shot at it again. For Munich, it doesn't really matter. They can rest players. But for a team that's not having the greatest season, Berlin or others, it'll make it Darmstadt, which just named Thornton Strings as their manager. It's that time period that's important now.
Exactly. All right. I think that will do it for today. Another holiday edition. As I said, we will let you know through social media tasks what the actual schedule looks like for next week. We'll probably experiment with a few different things for the first week or so until we settle into a consistent schedule. It may be earlier. We were talking about something in the mornings. We've also talked about something in the evenings. We're got to work between two schedules, so there's some complications involved there. Yeah. There might be the odd day here and there that's not on the main schedule, but we'll let you know for sure. But in the meantime, enjoy your New Year's Eve weekend. Happy 2017, blank 2016. And as always, Kevin, say goodbye.
Until next year. Well, have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.